George, you telling me about when the USS Franklin got hit, and that was on the morning of March the 17th. Is this not right? 1945.
March the 19th
March the 19th,
at
1945.
7:09 a.m.
What were you doing at this point?
At
Just
the
tell us
time
that.
that the bomb hit, I had been relieved from duty. I'd been in general quarters for 3 days. And my entire group, there were about 8 or 9 of us, we were told to double time it and get to the mess hall and eat for the first time in several days and go on to our secondary station. And I was, at the time I was relieved, me and the 8 men, we double timed it down the ladders to the mess hall and were eating breakfast when the bomb hit.
Is there an estimate on how big a bomb it was?
We think it was a 250-pound bomb. The trouble is, it landed in very close proximity to 2,500 1,000-pound bombs, torpedoes, and the new Tiny Tim rocket. And they all went off, exploded.
What was going on at the point when when the bomb went off, where you were standing? You said you'd been down the mess. Were you standing waiting to get served, or were you sitting down?
I was at a table with about 10 men. We were all eating our breakfast when the bomb went off. And of course, the concussion of the bomb explosion blew everyone in the mess hall completely across the compartment, and we hit the bulkhead over on the starboard side with our bodies.
So it basically picked you all up and flung you against the bulkhead,
Yes,
the wall,
the
and
force killed a number of those men.
so a number of them were killed. Of the 50 or so people in there, how many survived?
13
13, just
were able
one
to
third.
leave the mess hall.
That's interesting. What would did you all immediately leave the mess hall? Was it on fire, or was something going
The
on?
mess hall, of course, the lights, all electricity was blown out. The battle lamps came on, and they started filling up with smoke immediately. And we exited through a port side ladder to the next deck, the second deck above, on our way to the hangar deck. My job was to go to radio number 2 in general quarters. We were not at general quarters, we were at breakfast. And 13 of us out of some 40 or 50 actually survived the explosion and made it up to the next deck. No one survived in the mess hall after the bomb exploded. And we battened down the hatches on the next deck to keep the smoke and the fire out. But we were not able to get up the next ladder to the hangar deck. It was completely afire. Everything was exploding. There were some 50, 60 aircraft there, all armed to the teeth with bombs, torpedoes, fighters with machine guns, all of that, and it was all exploding.
So the rounds from the machine guns and the armament started cooking off, and all the ordnance. And at that point, the fire was very intense. I take it.
You can't imagine how hot it was. The deck in some places was melting from the heat. It was glowing. Fortunately, we weren't in the area where it was glowing that close. We were able to stay away from it. But we were trying to get across the deck, the hangar deck, that contained 400 or 500 pieces of men's bodies, burned out aircraft. It was a carnage house. We had to go 80 feet to the starboard side from the port side It took us an hour or so to get through all of it. You couldn't see where you were going. We were crawling and bent over, trying to get around all the metal. The gallery deck above us had completely collapsed and was laying on top of the hangar deck.
Did you make your way to the back of the ship, toward the front of the ship?
We were about midships, and we were going aft to some degree. After quite a bit of time, we made it to the starboard side aft to the 20 and 40 millimeter gun mounts, and we did not find anybody alive there either. That was 13 of us.
So anyone that was exposed on these gun mounts was killed pretty instantly, I take it.
Supposedly.
Did you see any bodies?
There's pieces of bodies everywhere.
Pieces of bodies. So these people were all dismembered.
Yeah, none of them had on
soldiers,
clothing. The
sailors.
explosions blew the clothing off the bodies. It was just
Terrible sight.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing it with us, George. When you got to the gun mounts for the 20 and the 40 millimeter guns, did you then jump into the water? Did you try to stay on the ship?
The ship was listing, and we had been told by some of the old salts that were with us that we'd been torpedoed, and we all thought we were torpedoed, and the ship was listing. We thought it was going to capsize, and about that time, when we were trying to make up our mind what we're going to do, we didn't have any options. We had to stay where we were and get killed. We had to go in the water to get killed, or try to move anywhere else aboard the ship and get killed. There weren't any options except trying to make it into the water, and nobody had any life preservers. We didn't have any life jackets. We had absolutely nothing for buoyancy. I had just been relieved on duty, and my life jacket was put on to the man who relieved me, and all I had was my white cap. When
you then jumped into the water, how long were you in the water? Well, yeah, I assume this was very cold water because it was in March.
I was not going to jump because my leader was Walter Beguziak. Walter couldn't swim, and he told me to make my own choice, what I wanted to do, and my choice was to stay with him. I was waiting for one of the guys that was going to jump. I was going to take his helmet to keep the shrapnel off of me. And about that time, a huge aviation tank about 80 feet further up the ship from us, but over on the starboard side, exploded. This is napalm. And it was just a big whoosh. There wasn't a lot of concussion with it, but the heat was unbearable. And those that were left there, we wound up in the water. It wasn't by choice, but that's what happened. The heat from that napalm runs several hundred degrees Fahrenheit, anywhere from 900 degrees all the way up to 2,000 degrees. And the heat was just something that a human being couldn't tolerate.
Did you you got in the water? Did you swim to a nearby vessel, or did you just hold on to some debris?
No, all you can do is just hold on, stay afloat the best way you can. Of the 13 of us that went in the water, 10 of them drowned right away. They were all hurt. There were 3 of us that survived, but the other 2 were injured. And I tried to keep them afloat, and I had a very hard time of doing it. they just kept drinking water, and I wound up burying both of them.
Did another ship pick you up, or a passing vessel?
Well, the
Get you out of the
entire
water?
United States Navy was going by at the time, but they could not pick us up. There's a war on,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't come close to us because if they passed us by, the wake would drown us.
Mm.
So they would throw life preservers over the side as they went by, but they were too far away. You couldn't swim to them and drown trying to get there.
Mm.
So we just had to make out the best way we could, and that was around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I wound up being there all by myself, and I was picked up just before dark that day.
So you were in the water all day? pretty
Yes.
much. Well, then you then transitioned back to the continental USA or Hawaii, or
I was picked up by a destroyer, the USS Hunt, and after I was picked up, I was put in their sick bay along with a bunch of others. And I woke up the next day. The battle was over for us, but the Japanese had dive bombed us and killed 921 men. They also dive bombed the USS Wasp and put her out of action. They dive bombed the USS Enterprise, but she was still operational. So the Navy broke off and created what they called the crippled fleet. We had 3 aircraft carriers. The Enterprise was still operational and could protect us, although damaged. And with 6 or 8 destroyers, we went back to Ulithi.
you went back to Ulithi? Where's
we went by Okinawa and by Iwo Jima to Ulithi. The war was over. The battle was over at Iwo Jima, and they were putting everybody on our ship that survived. We were mixed up with the Marines that were on Iwo Jima, the injured ones. We were all put on those hospital ships, and Army ships. I was put on the General Grant for a few days, and then we headed back to Pearl. It's interesting to note that the war in Europe was just coming to a close. It was nearing April, and I think the war was over in Europe in May, but the British fleet was not needed in the Atlantic at that time, and they had sailed their aircraft carriers to the Pacific waters, and the British aircraft carriers were not attack carriers like our fleet, but they were experts at killing submarines, and they protected us all the way back to Pearl.
Well, that's a really great story, George.
Yep.
I appreciate you sitting down and talking today with me about this. I want to wrap up by saying that this interview is conducted on May the 27th, 2009 with Mr. George Black of Houston. I'm the interviewer. My name is Howard Dunbar. If you need to review this, contact us. You can do so by emailing myself, and my email is hddun@swbell.net, and George's email, George, could you tell us what your email is? Seahorse?
Seahorse at sbcglobal.net.
Okay. Thank you, George. Enjoyed the interview and appreciate your time.